9 experienced hikers vanished in the Ural Mountains. Their tent was found slashed open from the inside. Bare footprints led into a frozen forest. No survivors. No clear answers. Only theories. In Part 1, we walked through the final days of the Dyatlov group. 9 young adventurers, skilled and determined, heading toward a mountain called Otter 10 in late January 1959. They never came back. A rescue team found their tent weeks later on the slope of Kolatsyakol. It was cut open from the inside. Bare footprints led downhill into the trees, each step pressed into the snow without boots or protection. 2 bodies were discovered near a cedar tree. 3 more lay scattered between the cedar and the tent, frozen mid-crawl as if trying to return. 4 others were found months later, buried deep in a ravine beneath layers of compacted snow. Some had catastrophic injuries: broken ribs, fractured skulls, internal trauma with no matching external wounds, as if crushed by immense force. Traces of radiation were detected on their clothes. 1 victim was missing her tongue. The official cause of death, quote, a compelling natural force. Vague, deliberate, unsettling. Tonight we examine the theories, the explanations, the arguments that have persisted for decades, and the silence that remains. Avalanche. The simplest theory is an avalanche. A sudden wall of snow breaks loose. It hits the tent with crushing weight. The group panics. They cut their way out and flee downhill into the darkness. Some freeze. Some are injured. Case closed. Except it doesn't fit. The tent was still partly standing when it was found. The support poles were upright. The snow cover was shallow, not the deep burial you'd expect from a major slide. Rescue teams saw no avalanche debris, no telltale tongue of displaced snow cutting down slope. The slope angle matters. The tent sat on a mild incline, around 15 to 20 degrees. Most slab avalanches need steeper terrain to release with force. The footprints leading down were clear and deliberate, not the chaotic churn of people buried and clawing free. Their gear stayed inside: boots, coats, tools. If a deadly slide had passed and the danger was over, why didn't they go back? Hours passed before hypothermia set in. They had time. They chose not to return. Avalanche is plausible, but it doesn't fully fit the pattern. Hypothermia. Hypothermia is brutal and relentless. In extreme cold, the body turns on itself. Judgment fails. Coordination collapses. Victims undress paradoxically as nerves misfire and the brain perceives dangerous warmth. This could explain the odd clothing, the barefoot exits, the slow, wandering deaths in the snow. But hypothermia is a process, not an event. It doesn't slash tents from the inside, while boots sit within arm's reach. It doesn't fracture ribs like a car crash. It doesn't remove a tongue. And while paradoxical undressing happens, the clothing distribution here is stranger. Some garments were cut and shared. Layers moved from the dead to the living. That shows rational survival behavior, clear thinking in the midst of crisis. Then the ravine bodies show catastrophic injuries inconsistent with simple wandering collapse. Something else happened to them. Hypothermia explains the cold, not the chaos. Human error. Human error is the quiet suspect. A navigational mistake. A rushed camp on an exposed slope. Tent pitched poorly in rising wind, vulnerable to the elements. Maybe the stove malfunctioned. Smoke filled the tent. Panic takes hold. They cut free and flee to the tree line, thinking they'll wait it out and return. A stove mishap is possible, but investigators said the stove was unassembled when found. No soot, no burned fabric, no signs of fire inside the tent. If they feared suffocation or fire, why scatter, regroup, then split again? Why not set a permanent fire at the cedar and stay there together? Why try to climb back toward the tent without boots, without preparation? Human error often leaves a coherent chain of decisions. Here, the chain frays and breaks. It answers why they left, not why they died like this. Official explanations approach the truth. None hold it completely. Theories, 6 to 9 o'clock. Soviet military tests. The late 1950s, the Cold War freezes over everything. Land, language, truth. The Urals were not empty wilderness. Military projects lived in the shadows. Parachute mines, airbursts, weapon tests conducted far from public eyes. If the group camped under a test zone, a shock wave could flatten the tent. Internal injuries, minimal external marks. Fear of a second blast drives them downhill in terror. Searchers later report strange burn marks on branches. Some diaries mention glowing orbs in the sky, lights that moved in ways they couldn't explain. If the area was restricted, records would be sealed. If something classified happened, evidence would be diluted, obscured, or removed entirely. But there are problems. No verified schedule of tests at that location and time has surfaced in declassified records. No residue from explosives was documented in the official case file. The injuries are varied, some consistent with falls and impacts, some with compression. The pattern doesn't match a single explosive event. If the military discovered the tragedy early, why leave the scene as it was? Why not extract the tent, erase the traces, and control the narrative more tightly? The theory carries weight in whispers. It remains speculation. Radioactive materials. Traces of radiation on clothing raised alarms. It fed rumors of nuclear materials. Maybe the hikers handled contaminated gear. Maybe a test sprayed fallout across the region. Maybe one of them worked in a facility and brought traces with them. The context is complex. In the 1950s, low-level contamination wasn't rare in certain industries and research institutes. Some in the group had technical backgrounds. Transfer from lab clothing could linger on fabric for months. The radiation levels recorded were elevated, but not uniformly across all items, not high enough to cause acute symptoms that night. And radiation doesn't cut a tent. It doesn't break bones without external force. It doesn't explain footprints, the cedar fire, the attempt to return uphill. Contamination may be a red herring,
or a clue without a story. Infrasound. Wind over the pass can roar like a machine. Some propose the Kármán vortex street effect. Under certain conditions, wind passing over terrain generates infrasound waves at specific frequencies. We can't hear them. We can feel them. Nausea, dread, overwhelming panic. The group experiences an intense fear response triggered by sound they can't consciously detect. They flee the tent. Later, clarity returns. They try to light a fire. They try to climb back. It explains irrational evacuation. It respects the environment as the trigger, not human malice or mechanical failure. But it struggles with the injuries in the ravine. Panic doesn't crush rib cages. Panic doesn't keep 9 people synchronized in silence, moving as a group without argument or dissent. Diaries and photos from earlier in the trip show cohesion and morale. For all 9 to be overwhelmed to the same degree, without any vocal dissenter or rational anchor, is hard to accept. Infrasound could push them out. It can't finish the story. UFO, or unknown intelligence. Lights in the sky were reported by others in the region that winter. The hikers photographed odd exposures on their final roll of film. Some see orbs. Some see proof of something beyond. Unknown craft, unknown beings, unknown motives. It explains everything by explaining nothing. When evidence is scarce, the extraordinary appears to fit. But the injuries are worldly. Cold, gravity, force, the physics of bone and snow. The patterns on the ground are human. The footprints show no chase, no scramble. The branches bend because hands climbed them. The snow yields under known weights. Mystery is not a license to abandon reason. The unknown may be here, but we shouldn't summon it before we exhaust the known. Conclusion, 9 to 11 o'clock. The Dyatlov Pass Incident resists the comfort of a final line. It's a puzzle with missing pieces. Time buried them. Snow moved them. People argued over them for decades. The official files closed with a phrase that admits defeat. Quote, "A compelling natural force." What do we know? The tent was cut from within. They left without proper clothing, without boots, without the gear that could have saved them. They moved together at first. They built a fire under the cedar. They climbed its branches to see. Some fell. Some suffered crushing injuries, likely from heavy snow or a fall into the ravine. Some died where they tried to survive. Their bodies found in positions that suggest they never stopped fighting. Hours passed between the start and the end. There were moments of reason. There were decisions that can't be understood from warm rooms and safe streets. Why is it unsolved? Because the mountain kept secrets. Because the search was delayed by winter and distance. Because the Cold War clipped truths and sealed files. Because the boundary between explanation and speculation is thin when the wind erases lines. Nature is not an antagonist. It's indifferent. It has its own language, its own logic. We mistake silence for conspiracy. We mistake coincidence for design. Sometimes we face a chain of small causes, each ordinary alone, together lethal. Imagine the night. The wind builds. The snow shifts above the tent seam. A weighted slab presses and bends fabric. Poles strain. The sound is wrong, a creaking that shouldn't be there. The line between caution and panic disappears. They cut free into black air. Downhill feels safer than the creaking slope above them. In the tree line, they work. They climbed a cedar to watch the tent, to see if it's safe to return. They break branches for fire. The flames flicker, weak against the cold. Someone attempts to return for gear. The slope steals strength with every step. A cornice breaks near the ravine. Snow collapses. Chests crush under the weight. The others drift into sleep they can't wake from. Is this what happened? It could be, or not. The truth is a shape in blowing snow. Every theory paints its edges. None fills it in completely. The fear this case inspires is older than the Cold War. It's the fear of losing control, of stepping into a landscape that won't yield to our plans or respect our preparation, of discovering that expertise protects but doesn't guarantee survival. These were not reckless tourists. They were measured. They were prepared. They were experienced. They were human. And the mountain is patient. We look at their photos and search for omens. Smiles in the snow. A tent, neat and tight against the wind.
Search for omens. Smiles in the snow. A tent, neat and tight against the wind. Skis planted in a line like sentries guarding the camp. Ordinary images before an extraordinary night. The mind wants a single cause, a villain, a device, a signal from above or below. But sometimes tragedy is not a single event. It's a sequence. It's 9 people making the best decisions they can under the worst conditions, minute by minute, until there are no minutes left. That's why it lingers. Not because of lights in the sky, not because of redacted pages, but because it mirrors our limits. The map ends, the weather turns, the plan fails, and what remains is endurance and each other. When those fail, the story ends in the snow. The Dyatlov Pass Incident will always have room for shadows. It will attract them. It will keep them. We return to it like hikers to a landmark, tracing boot prints that stop where the white begins. The mountain does not answer. It only listens, and then covers the truth.